Hi, I'm Colonel Kyle Markram, a student at the United States Army War College. In our papers, Dr. Brendan Mulvaney and I attempt to explore the Chinese views of deterrence. But this is a particularly difficult task because when you ask United States decision makers the definition of deterrence, you get a lot of different answers. So let's start with the definition of deterrence. Joint Doctrine Note 2-19, Strategy, defines coercion as the use of threats of force to shape the behavior of another actor. It's commonly split into two forms, deterrence and compellence. Deterrence seeks to prevent an enemy from taking an action he has not yet taken. In other words, it's telling them don't. Compellence, on the other hand, seeks to persuade an enemy to do something he would rather not do, or cease an action he has already begun. In other words, it's telling them stop or go back. In both cases, the coercer threatens the use of force if the target state does not comply. It's often said that coercion needs the 3 C's: credibility, capability, and communication. Since it's a threat, you have to communicate that threat. So what do the Chinese have to say about this? My favorite Chinese English dictionary, Pleco, defines Wei Shi as deterrence. Even the China Aerospace Studies Institute's excellent translation of the 2020 Science and Military Strategy uses this translation. But the 2020 Science and Military Strategy says in Chapter 8, called Strategic Deterrence, deterrence has 2 basic functions. One is to stop the other party from doing what they don't want to do, and the other is to use deterrence to coerce the other party to do what they must do. This is the definition of deterrence and compellence. In other words, it's the definition of coercion. This goes beyond the 2020 Science and Military Strategy. This is in previous versions of the Science and Military Strategy, as well as in their Junyu, their Dictionary of Military Terms. In fact, the PRC has a 2019 white paper called China's National Defense in the New Era. And in it, it lists their national defense aims. In their own English translation, the first one is to deter and resist aggression. The Chinese version says 设置, or to use fear to stop someone. It sounds a lot like deterrence. So actually, Chapter 8 should be translated as strategic coercion, not strategic deterrence. So we already have a problem in the study of PRC views of deterrence. But this goes far beyond CASI's excellent translation that I totally love. This is in Pleco. This is in that little red Oxford dictionary that us old folks used to use when we studied Chinese. This is in every document you have read in English about Chinese deterrence. This isn't a bad translation. This is a fundamental and systemic failure to understand that there's a difference. Okay, so there's a difference. Why is this important? Well, first because deterrence, compellence, and coercion carry different contexts in the Western minds. The grandfather of coercion theory, Thomas Schelling, in his famous book, Arms and Influence, talks about the offensiveness of coercion and the defensiveness of deterrence. These distinctions are likely lost on the Chinese. German philosopher Martin Heidegger said that language shapes us. It's also said that just as the hand shapes the hammer, so too does the hammer shape the hand. The way we approach the world is not just tainted by our language, but it's the very filter we use to approach and understand the world. Okay, so what does the PLA say about coercion? Well, they say a lot of things. So go read CASI's excellent translation. That's up on their website. But I want to highlight a few things to make sure we understand. First, the Chinese say that strategic coercion is about seeking potential, 是, or I like to use Francois Julien's translation and say propensity. If you're interested in propensity and Chinese planning, my upcoming paper, Propensity, Conditions, and Consequences, discusses that. It says that all the ways to build strategic coercion use propensity, and it lists these ways. First, create an atmosphere that war is imminent, including, they say, having the National People's Congress issue a war mobilization order. Second, show advanced weapons. Specifically mentioned are nuclear weapons, precision-guided weapons, space weapons, and new concept weapons. In this section, they mention leaving the opponent with speculation and imagination. Specifically, not giving too much information. Contrast that with the 3 C's, including communication. Sixth, implementing information attacks. Offensive cyber attacks to attack the enemy's command and early warning and air defense and anti-missile systems. Seventh is about limiting the choices available to the enemy. But eighth, warning military strikes deserve special attention. It says the purpose is not to destroy, but to show the ability and determination to strike when necessary. Enhancing the effectiveness of deterrence by means of small battles. that, quote, have obvious deterrent effects. Here and in other writings, including Xi Jinping, as Rod Lee points out in his latest War on the Rocks article, the PRC talks a lot about using small wars to deter large wars. The PRC is willing to use attacks to demonstrate resolve and capability in order to enhance what they think is deterrence. Would the US see a smoking aircraft carrier as a deterrent or as a first strike in a war? Actually, the line between those, if it exists in the PRC, is either very thin or non-existent. Throughout the Science of Military Strategy and other writings, it's clear that the PRC does not see a clear line between deterrence/coercion and war. According to them, coercion can be divided into peacetime crisis and wartime coercion. In the section called Guidance on Strategic Deterrence, it says that you must carefully plan the transition from deterrence to actual combat. Note the last sentence there. We should be ready to switch to actual combat at any time to ensure the deterrence effect. The part in the middle, that the transformation from deterrence to actual combat is a qualitative change, is a reference to dialectics. Coercion and war are a dialectic. Again, my upcoming paper discusses the use of dialectics in PRC decision-making. So they approach coercion and deterrence different. So what? Well, Johnson, Mueller, and Taft state in their conventional coercion across the spectrum of operations, deterrence, like all coercion, occurs in the mind of the adversary. Reality matters in deterrence only insofar as it affects the perceptions of those who will choose whether or not to be deterred. In other words, it doesn't matter what one actor thinks of their coercion efforts. What matters is what the enemy thinks. So while we're attempting to deter China, we're using our own definitions, our own ideas, and our own perspective. But similarly, they're having the same challenges trying to deter us. Season 1, Episode 9 of The Simpsons was called Life in the Fast Lane. Homer loves bowling and he wants his wife to join, so he buys her a bowling ball for her birthday. She is furious, but he doesn't understand why because he fails to understand her perspective. This is our efforts at deterrence. We're failing to deter them with our bowling ball gift. We say that there are 3 C's to coercion: capability, credibility, and communication. But we like to ignore or minimize the communication bit. I would argue that it's the most important part. Communication is the responsibility of the communicator. In other words, it is our responsibility to make sure that the PRC hears and understands our coercion threats. If they don't, then they have no chance to take the actions that we want them to take. Dale Carnegie, in his famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, says, if there is any one secret to success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from that person's angle as well as from your own. This book is by an American, about Americans, for Americans. But we still need someone to tell us that. His book is still wildly popular today. So how far do you think we are from understanding a people that have a different culture and a different language? It is our responsibility to tailor our coercion threats to the Chinese culture and language to make sure the PRC understands. If you only take one thing away from this video, let it be this. Things are complicated. We don't expect a 30-minute pre-brief to suffice for pilot training or medical school. So why is a 30-minute pre-brief all you need before you have negotiations with someone of another language or culture? The most deadly surgery in history only killed 3 people. I'm Colonel Kyle Markram, and thanks. If you're interested in propensity and Chinese planning, it's all in my upcoming paper called Propensity, Planning, Nope, and Nope.